That's incredible. And there's a part in there right in the beginning that really connects with a passage that I was reading and hearing earlier in the week. It was fascinating, and it kind of touches on a bit of what we were talking about the conversation prior to starting the podcast. So I was watching these or hearing these two gentlemen in a podcast, and they were speaking. One of the guys, the guest essentially, he's an ex Google like engineer. So he, incredible man, incredible man. You could tell. I mean, like his capacity, his knowledge is insane. And so he was speaking on because he was an engineer, particularly in the AI space. And what he was talking about was, you mentioned simplicity in life, right? But what he was mentioning in the conversation that struck me as something very fascinating is there's a difference between simplicity and convenience, or making too much of something in which now there's a comfort being built in society. And that was fascinating for me to hear, because I'm starting to realize, and you were touching on that, because a lot of what he was speaking about is the host of the podcast asked him where does he see AI when it comes to human to human interaction as far as romance is concerned. And he was, one of the reasons why he left Google is because he was a part of a team creating this technology that they wanted to serve a humanitarian, like a good purpose. And essentially, he realized after pursuing that for so long, they essentially opened up Pandora's box, and it was something that he didn't see a being able to control and contain in a manner where he felt he could give any contribute to anymore. So that's why he left. And so essentially in the conversation he was speaking about how there's this shift in, because the convenience of somebody giving you exactly what you ask for and not challenging you in any way, that we're creating the society in which there's the interactions from human to human and gender to gender. There's no clear, there's like no clear blueprint of like, okay, this is what my role is as a male, and this is what your role is as a female. The lines blur and blur more and more each day, and he sees AI adding to that problem from that aspect. And it was so fascinating to hear that conversation, because I'm like, wow. He went into details talking about, like, you know, when you think about the society that even we're in now, like we find ways to make things that are not normal. Like, you know, if you look across the Hudson River, we've have this iron jungle that we've constructed that's man-made, and it's like we've found a way to build that into our society where we feel like that's normal. Like if New York City wasn't there, we would feel like something is wrong. Like, and so it just went into so much detail on like the over not simplifying, but the over making things too convenient in life is what's contributing to a lot of these things that we see.
Well, it's one, the way he's able to conceptualize. He's a genius because it's really the truth, and that's exactly what he's saying. He's saying that, 200-300 years ago, that New York City would have not been normal.
Right.
200-300 years ago, New York City would have been looked at as an atrocity from the perspective of the human being at that time.
Right.
That goes back to the Renaissance. You think about, Paris, right? And the way that's set up. Think about all the churches and all that architecture and the way it was built. Like, when you're talking about a church being built over 300 years lifespan, like that's amazing. Yeah. That goes from transcending in generations. But are all those things really normal? Are they really what the earth is? It's all the way we're taught. We're taught that normalization. But the reality about life is, if you're comfortable all the time, then what's the purpose? Because the reality is our perception gets opened up as we are challenged and we are uncomfortable. That's how our perception grows. That's how our spirit grows. That's how we grow. You know, so if you're giving people just a life of comfort and that's all they know, they'll never they'll never mature as a human spirit, as a human being. Their heart, their mind, they'll never mature. Either they're gonna stay stagnant the whole life. Where if you really understand what a human being is meant to be challenged, it's meant to be uncomfortable because life is adventure. Life, the excitement comes in the thrill and the risk. Without risk, what's the point of the reward? You know, it's like when you hear that phrase that what's a love worth having that you don't have to fight for. You know, just to even touch on that basis, it takes effort. Love takes effort. Any relationship takes effort. You know, being yourself takes effort.
Yeah.
And if you're not putting yourself up against challenge, if you're not putting yourself up against obstacles, if you're not taking risks, right? Then how will you know what you're made of? How will you know what you're capable of? How will you know what your human spirit is? And the reality is that when you're doing these things, what you're really doing, right, is you're becoming you. You're taking off all the impressions, everything you've ever been taught, all those layers of impressions, and you're like just taking them off like if they were clothes that were put on you, right? And then you're just coming back to that pureness of creativity. You know, like when you were a child and all you could think of your imagination was wild and free. Yeah. You know, that you used to get excited over everything. Because that's really what it is. What happens when you get rid of all the baggage that you have? Because you're carrying such a heavy load. What happens when you get rid of all that?
Yeah.
Then your energy is free. I spoke to a man today, right? And he goes and he tells me about how, you know, like he can't believe the things I'm doing. He goes, "Oh, how old are you?" Right? And I'm like, "Oh, I'm 37." And then he's like, "Well, I'm 50." And then he was like, "So is the," and then I was like, "Listen, I'm so sorry and I really apologize. But you have to understand that I cannot, you know, I'm not gonna accept what you're telling me."
Right.
You know, like the belief you're trying to tell me is limiting. And if I just know if I sit here and I listen to you tell me about how it is when you're 50, I disagree because I have students who are well above your age who do incredible and extraordinary things. Yeah. So, you know, what I'll tell you is that I don't know who put that into you. Yeah. But, you know, like, that's not the truth. You know, so whoever tamed your spirit, you know, like let your spirit free. You have the energy. Yeah. I know people that do remarkable things. The human spirit is powerful. It's unbelievable. You know, and somebody boxed yours in, and you know what? Like, let it free. Yeah. You can. And I hope I'm not offending you because I don't mean anything. I don't mean anything wrong by it. Just imagine that I want the best for you, and I want you to know that you can do anything, you know. So all I want to do is encourage you. Right. And if you feel like I'm offensive, I sincerely from my heart I apologize, because I'm not trying to come off that way. I'm just also protecting myself and my spirit.
Of course.
You know, and you know what he said? Wow. Thank you so much. I needed to hear that today.
Wow. That's fascinating.
You know?
Absolutely.
And that's what life is, you know? We have to question things. Like ultimately is that we have to learn to think for ourselves. We got to feed that thinking. People need to learn how to become better thinkers. And you cannot become a better thinker without learning more information and experiencing that information. So the part of what we do here is the mental fitness. That's why we give books away, because we want people to think. We want people to question. Yes. You know, we want people to then, you know, the emotional fitness is about the dialogues and the conversations. So that way, whenever you walk into any environment, you know you can have a conversation with anyone and stand your ground on the idea of how much you know. And not coming from a place of where you're gonna react to someone from emotion, and that primitive side of you comes out because the primitive side of you is stronger. You know, we both have that primitive side of our brain, and then we have that logical human side of our brain, you know, and then, but the reality is what happens when you combine both and you really learn to manage that, then that subconscious that you have, your supercomputer, that's what leads in the front. And when you can do that, it's like everything just flows.